Hello, my name is Catherine Rechs, and I am the librarian at a kindergarten through 8th grade elementary school in Sacramento, California. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation. Bullseye, Elementary Student Book Selection and Reading Level. I became interested in this topic because of a debate that's currently going on in my school district. We've adopted a new Common Core aligned ELA curriculum, and this curriculum regularly tracks and tests students' reading level using a Lexile measurement, and then assigns each child a Lexile reading score. The curriculum then strongly encourages students to only read text that has a matching Lexile text difficulty score. Administrators and some teachers have then suggested that it might be better for students to have all the text they're reading be within this Lexile reading range, that being text that they're reading in their classroom for instruction, as well as the pleasure reading that they're doing. So they've approached librarians to ask how we can assist with this, which brings up the questions: should pleasure reading material that students select from the library be limited to their text, to text at their level? Should books be labeled with a Lexile reading level to assist students in finding appropriate material? And if we do label the books, does that constitute a breach of student privacy, since it broadcasts the student reading level to anyone who chooses to look at the label on their chosen book? When I started looking into this topic, I realized that first we have to ask, do students choose books at their reading level when they don't have a label to guide them? So when I started looking at past research to answer this question, I found a little bit, not a lot, but what I did find was pretty problematic. The first problem was that the studies were old. The most recent study was from 2000, and since then there have been major changes in educational practice and reading instruction. We went from a largely phonics-based instruction that was popular through the 1980s, and then in the 90s we moved to a whole language approach, and then around 2000 we adopted something called balanced literacy, which was a combination of a phonics and whole language approach. And I think that it's entirely possible with the new reading instruction that the way children are choosing text on their own and what they're choosing on their own could have changed. In addition, in the last 20 years, we've developed new ways to measure text difficulty. In the studies that I found, text difficulty was measured using the Fry readability graph, or they would just record how many miscues students had when reading a passage from their text. But now we have new measurements that use far more data points when determining a text level. One of those new measurements is a Lexile level, which has never been used in one of these studies. In addition to them being old, the studies that I found had contradictory results. In one of them, all the kids they looked at tended to choose books at their reading level most of the time. In another study, the high-achieving readers chose books at their level, but poor readers chose books that were too difficult. And in a third study, the high readers chose books that were too easy, and the low readers chose books that were too high. So there clearly was not a definitive answer in these studies. Which brings me to the core questions of this study. When a student chooses a book independently from the school library, how often will the Lexile text level of the book match the Lexile reading level of the student? And when the book's text level and the student's reading level don't match, how often is the book at a higher reading level, and how often is the book at a lower reading level than the student? The study population will be the patrons of the Genevieve Didion Elementary School Library, who are in grades 3rd through 6th. This will be approximately 280 students. From this study population, we're going to be collecting several pieces of information. First, we will collect the first trimester Lexile reading level of the students in grades 3 through 6. Then we'll collect the Lexile text levels of the books checked out by those students over an 8-week period during the first trimester of school. We'll then compare the text level of the books selected to the students' reading level. The results will be recorded as 3 possible outcomes. Each book can be too high, within, or too low compared to the student's reading level. So how will we collect this data? In step 1, students will take an online assessment in the Benchmark Advanced ELA curriculum. This assessment will assign each student a Lexile reading score. Then each student's teacher will record the result of this assessment, creating a table with student identification numbers and their associated Lexile reading score. In step 2, the librarian will collect information on each book checked out by students in the study population during an 8-week period of the first trimester of the school year. The librarian will create a table with the student's identification number and the Lexile reading levels of the books checked out by that student. Next, the table created by the teacher and the table created by the librarian will go to the school principal. The principal will be in charge of pairing the student reading level data with the book checkout data. A computer program designed specifically for this study will anonymize the data, replacing the student identification number with a randomly generated number. This new data, which will contain no identifying information about the students, will be given to the researcher for analysis. So from this information, each book checked out by a member of the study population will become a data point. Each data point will be recorded as too high, too low, or within, representing a book that was higher than the student's Lexile reading level, lower than the student's Lexile reading level, or at the student's Lexile reading level. The results will be presented as a simple percentage of the whole, and because of that, no statistical analysis will be necessary. The rationale for why this study is set up the way it is includes the study is double-blind, so the students don't know that their books are being analyzed and the researcher doesn't know who the students are or even what the books are. They just see the numbers. Using Lexile levels are an objective and consistent way to track student reading levels and text difficulty levels. The study population regularly self-selects books for independent pleasure reading, so there's going to be a lot of data points. The time span is long enough to allow for the collection of several thousand data points, but it's short enough to control for growth in student reading ability, and no identifying data is being used, so student privacy is maintained. This study involves human subjects, and those human subjects are children, so we must take careful consideration of all the ethical issues involved. The study will be submitted for IRB approval. However, it is expected that it will be deemed exempt by the IRB board, since no identifying information will be part of the data analyzed. FERPA, the set of laws which protect the privacy of student information, will be addressed by consulting the school principal and the school district legal department. Student privacy is maintained throughout the data collection. Teachers, the librarian, and the principal will only see student information to which they are already privy. Furthermore, FERPA laws allow student information to be shared in order to conduct studies which help improve instruction. For these reasons, it's expected that the data can be collected without violating FERPA laws. There are some limitations to this study. The sample population, being from a single school, is relatively homogeneous. Lexile levels, as all text difficulty measurements, are imperfect. And the books checked out will become data points with no differentiation made between books which were perhaps chosen because of a recommendation from an adult or a peer, books that were chosen because of a school assignment, and those books that were chosen independently for pleasure reading. And finally, the significance of the study. It's important because labeling books with reading levels in a school library is problematic. It's time intensive to do. It can be considered a breach of student privacy. So to make an educated decision on the costs versus the benefits of labeling the books, we need to know how successful students are at choosing books at their level without the aid of a label. And finally, the significance of the study. It's important because labeling books with reading levels in a school library is problematic. It's time intensive to do. It can be considered a breach of student privacy. So to make an educated decision on the costs versus the benefits of labeling the books, we need to know how successful students are at choosing books at their level without the aid of a label.